Welcome back to the second of 3 Advent addresses during our quiet day at St. Mary's, Green Cove Springs. Norman and I have been friends since we were 4 years old. 65 years is a long time for a friendship to endure, particularly since we haven't lived within 200 miles of each other since we were 18 and we left for our respective colleges. In the early 1980s, I went to visit him in New York City, where he was living in a studio apartment. What passed for a studio apartment was one room only large enough for a loft bed with a desk beneath it and a futon beside it. The single closet was 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep, and it was between the door and the kitchenette unit, which was comprised of a bar sink and an under-counter refrigerator with 2 burners on top of it. Above the kitchenette unit was a single cabinet over the tiny sink. It was the smallest living space I had ever been in. I looked at this small space as a great deprivation. Norman laughed and quipped, "Yes, I can't even buy a sweater without getting rid of an old sweater, so I have a place for it." But Norman explained his lack of possessions as ideal for New York living, since when he wanted to move, he packed a few boxes, carried them on the subway to his new apartment. Owning little allowed him flexibility and the ability to quickly respond to new possibilities. Norman's detached relationship to possessions was an ideal that I have never been able to achieve. But I've carried that image of his closet with me for almost 40 years. And in a room slightly larger than some walk-in closets I've seen on Instagram lately, note that Norman had a futon to provide hospitality to anyone in need of a bed. There is no doubt in my mind that had Mary and Joseph knocked on the door, Norman would have invited them in for the night. In the 13th chapter of John, Jesus washes the disciples' feet, forecasts his betrayal, gives them the new commandment to love one another, and tells Peter he will deny him 3 times. After all of that in chapter 13, he makes this statement at the beginning of chapter 14. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many, many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you?" Then he repeats the phrase in the next verse. "And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also." What is Jesus talking about? How is he preparing a place? I hear that phrase and I think he's cleaning house, but I don't think he's talking about cleaning house or redecorating. Philippians 2:6-8 describes Jesus as emptying himself of his godly glory to become incarnate as a fully human man and then be obedient to the point of death. That's powerful, emptying, cleaning imagery related to salvation. So what is it you need to clean up or get rid of to make room for Jesus? Because clearly, if your time, talent, and treasure is consumed with things of this world, you won't hear the knock at the door, much less open it and invite Jesus in. Earlier this morning, we looked at how cataclysmic events can sweep away the clutter of our lives and open the doors to new possibilities. But for this reflection, please look at what you're hanging on to or what's weighing you down. It may be too much stuff that once you buy it, you must store it, clean it, maintain it, use it, protect it, insure it, and remember where you put it. It may be just as likely too much social media, news, or politics, none of which are bad for us in moderation. But when we are absorbed in our own affairs, we have little time, energy, or interest for furthering the kingdom of God here on earth. Following our inclinations down a Facebook rabbit hole can also bring out the worst of our character, magnifying our self-righteousness and judgmentalism. It may be achievement and its cousin busyness, whereby we attempt to derive a sense of self-worth by doing for everyone, particularly if we can do it perfectly. Being overscheduled may be admired by society, but it doesn't leave much time for Jesus. During this quiet time, please reflect upon John 14 and Philippians 2 and ask yourself where you might make room for Jesus. Here are some questions for you to think about. If you had 5 minutes to evacuate your house and your children, animals, and important papers were in the car, what would you grab running out the door? And how would you feel if you returned several days later to find your house gone? Are you too busy? Are you overscheduled? How much screen time, gaming time, or TV time is too much? Is how you spend your time consistent with your values? And finally, we all know the cartoon of a newly departed soul at the pearly gates pleading his entrance to heaven to St. Peter, and it remains a powerful image. If you had to recommend yourself to St. Peter for entrance into heaven, what would you say about yourself?